On this episode of Gambler Spec, we're installing this ghost racing motor in our race car. Bed? It's a race car bed. Let's get started. So a couple weeks ago, as I was putting off current projects, looking for new projects, as I do, I was scrolling down Facebook, came across this blue race car bed, and thought to myself, that really needs to be a go-kart. So I offered the lady 30 bucks, she accepted, I drove and picked it up, and here it is. So let me talk you through my purchase. For 30 bucks, I got this toddler size race car bed. It's made by little Tikes. It's made of plastic. The wheels don't turn. And it came with a used mattress, which not real sure I'll be able to use that. But I love the look of this thing so much that I had to have it. So I remembered a video that I'd watched a while back where Hoonigan and Danger Dan actually did a similar thing where they took a race car bed and they combined it with like a shifter cart. But I remembered not really liking it very much. So I searched it up, looked back through some of the thumbnails, and I remembered why. So let me show you the way they did it, and I'll show you the way that I want to do it. So the way the Danger Dan did it, they tried to keep it looking as much like a bed as they could. They hid the shifter cart up under a piece of plywood. I think they covered it with like a sheet. And then they kept the existing wheels and tires so that it still kind of looked like a kid's bed, except for it had a steering wheel that came up. I think they had a blanket on it too. But the thing I didn't like about that design was, number one, you ride super, super high. So you're like floating up on top of the car as opposed to being down in the car. And then with the wheels not actually turning, it just looked a little bit odd when it was driving around. It didn't look much like a race car to me. So let me show you what I want to do. So this is my vision for the race car bed. I've got a bunch of this 1-inch steel tubing out in a scrap pile. I need to get rid of it anyway. I'm going to build an entire go-kart frame out of the 1-inch steel tubing. Obviously this is the toddler size bed. So there's not a ton of room inside. So leg room is going to be a problem. So initially I had thought I would go with a big block motor, but when you try to add a big block in here plus a seat, there just wasn't any room anywhere to put it. So I did pick up the Ghost Racing motor, and I did pick up this seat as well. I'm not sure this is going to be the one. It ended up being a little bit bigger than I thought it was going to be, but I really like the design and it was cheap, so I grabbed it. So we'll have the single seat, and then there's not going to be much room behind the seat. So I think the best plan is going to be to carve up inside the plastic on either side and see if you can't sit side by side. The seat next to the engine, run a torque converter back to a live axle. I want to keep the thing as low as possible. To me, what makes this thing look cool is the fact that it's like slammed, but that also creates a little bit of problem because, as you can see, these tires are actually floating in the air. So I'll come back, carve those holes out, and then I got to find a set of wheels and tires that are as close to these profiles as I can. I know they don't really make this size wheel or tire for that matter. So it'll just have to be something close to keep the same feel, but there'll be no more plastic fake wheels and tires. Those are going to be real. I've got to obviously leave a little bit of extra room in the front so they can turn. And then in the back, I want to try to put a nice fat tire, as fat as I can fit, with also still fitting the engine and the torque converter. So lots and lots of stuff to try to figure out. I'm going to spend several hours staring at this. I'm going to cut some pieces off. I've never worked with plastic like this before, so it's going to be a little bit of a learning curve, but I'm ready to get going. We got updates. So we got most of the plastic trimmed off that I think has to come off on the race car bed. There's definitely going to still be some that we need to trim once we get the actual frame up underneath it. But this is kind of where I wanted to start. As far as the minimum, I feel like you could trim off. I got this other seat, which I think could be a better option. I like that it sits up a little bit straighter. That'll let me move it back a little further. And also, I think the height is probably going to be closer to what I need. The one off Dolly Carton was a little too low, and the one that I bought off Facebook I think was a little too high. So I got that as an option. Pretty happy with it. Then I found these tires on Amazon. Now these are for a scooter, but really they had the best profile. I wanted to try to fill up these wheel wells as much as possible, and these had the best profile and the best tread, I felt like, to match what the race car bed had before. Well, I also found these wheels right here. These are 6-inch wheels to go with it. The issue that I had is they only made these wheels in 6-inch wide. So when I look at this here, this looks pretty good. I feel like the profiles are pretty similar. But when I actually put it on the wider wheel, now I've got more of a cartoon bubble going on with the tread instead of the straight up and down, because the wheels are wider than the tread is. So I'm just not sure I like it. I'm really torn on it because I know how hard I looked to find something that I liked, and this was kind of it. But now that it's together, I don't know if I love it. So I'm making some decisions, trying to figure out what to do. I could go and get a couple more wheels and try out in these tires and just see if I like it better with a skinnier wheel. It'll just be a wheel that I don't like as much, but maybe the fact that it's skinnier, it'll make it look, more square, and maybe that'll make me like it better. I don't really know. So I think next I'm going to go ahead and try to get this axle mocked up and then get to work on the frame while I make decisions on the wheels and then get those bolted up. Okay, I have officially exhausted all of my parts, so let me show you where I'm at. So I started off by building just a basic rectangle frame. It was wide enough to be able to put the seat and the engine side by side, but narrow enough to be able to put these back wheels and tires on. Once I got the seat and the engine mounted up, next I moved to the front. I needed room for these tires to be able to turn and also to be able to connect the spindles. So what I ended up doing was cutting about 5 inches out of the middle of this hoop. I cut it off the frame in the back and then re-welded it there, as you can see. that narrowed up the front, gave me room to be able to mount these spindles. I did get that second set of wheels in. These are only 3.5 inches wide, and you can see it's a much better fitment than those 6-inch wide wheels were. You lose that cartoon bubble shape by going to a narrower wheel. Really happy with the way that's fitting. Looks a lot better. Only problem I had was 2 of the wheels were actually damaged in shipment. BMI is supposed to be sending me replacement wheels, but they haven't told me exactly when they're going to be here. So still waiting on those so I can get these back ones replaced as well. The next problem that I ran into was with the carburetor. So you can see how close this engine is to the wheel and tire. I didn't have room to move the engine over because you got the seat. Can't move the seat because you got the body. So by the time you put the short intake tube that it comes with, the carb, and the air filter, you're hitting into the side of that tire. The solution that I came up with was to take a few pieces of scrap pipe and weld them together. That moved the carb up and back. That should give me enough room to be able to run the air filter without hitting anything else. Now that I got it on though, I am kind of thinking it's a little bit too high. So this probably won't be the final rendition of that intake tube. I think by the time you put the throttle linkage and everything on the top, it's gonna look a little bit funny. So that may end up changing. But really, I'm at a standstill anyway. I got to go ahead and get some parts ordered. I need to get pedals. I need to get a steering wheel. I've got to get the pulse pump. I've got to get the fuel tank, a few other odds and ends, tie rods, stuff like that. So I'm going to go ahead and get everything on order, and I'll get back with you as soon as everything gets in. Well, the project fatigue phase is real and it is not spectacular, but we do have some updates for you. Let's take a look. All right, so basically what we've got now is a rough draft of a finished go-kart. You can see we got the ghost motor mounted up. We've got a clutch installed here with the chain set up. I did come back and revise that intake tube so it's much, much lower. I think that's a much better fit. Added the K&N filter to the end there. You can see this pipe here, this hose, goes from the crankcase back to the pulse pump, and then the pulse pump takes the fuel from this ginormous plastic gas tank that I found on Amazon. I actually thought was about half that size, but never mind that. It takes the gas from this gas tank and then pumps it up and into the carb. So that worked out pretty well. I've got the brake drum installed here. I think this was like a 6-inch brake drum, if I'm not mistaken. We've got the steering wheel all installed. We've got the pedals done. Space, of course, is always the problem with these small go-karts. So one issue that I had was to get these tie rods to keep from hitting on your legs as you ride. I had to take this steering piece and extend it really, really low. What that means is that a small turn on the wheel actually does quite a bit out on the tires. I don't know that it's a really big deal. It just takes a little bit of getting used to, I think. But when you're trying to sit on this little tiny go-kart, there's only so much you can do. So that at least keeps my tie rods low. My engineering on this brake rod setup is not ideal. I kind of thought that this setup would keep it from twisting, but it really just kind of doesn't. It still has a little bit of a twist to it. But I think it'll be all right for the rough draft. I'll come back and revise that. As long as everything else works, I think we're okay. The next thing I did, I've got this framework set up here. In theory, that is all set up to the perfect height to be able to hold the bed frame over the go-kart and give you the clearance on the tires that you need. You can see I've got the 3.5-inch wide wheels all the way around now. We've got the axles all aligned. We've got the spindles all taken care of. And I think we're about to the point where we need to take this thing out and test drive. Leak checks are done. Bolt checks are done as far as I remember. So let's give this thing a shot. Okay, I got my son Dallin running the camera for me out on the street, so hopefully you can see a little bit better this time. Let's give it a shot. I haven't hooked up the kill switch yet, so I'm just gonna use this switch for now, but we'll add one. Oh yeah. Situation is not ideal, as usual, but we'll give it a go. Woo. Oh, that brake is not good. Alright, we're going to take it easy. It feels very scary. All right, so first impressions of the Racecar bed go-kart. It felt fast. It sounded amazing. The seat was nice. Felt really good. Actually didn't feel too cramped. I thought it'd feel a little more cramped, maybe when I get the body on there, but the seating position didn't feel too bad. The brakes were pretty weak and the steering was pretty jittery. But overall, I think it'll work. It feels like a win. So I think what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go ahead and take it out in the neighborhood a little bit more. I'm gonna ride it around and just see if there's anything else that I wanna change before I break it all down. Once I'm happy with it, I'm gonna take everything apart. I'll go ahead, clean up some of my welds, and then we'll throw a fresh coat of paint on the frame, and then we'll be ready to glue the race car bed body on the frame. So the next time you see it, this race car bed is becoming a real race car, and that's happening now.
So, I don't know if you guys can subscribe, but if you can, do it. Just do it.
Well, that's going to do it for this episode. I'm really happy with the way the race car bed turned out. I'm already thinking of other stuff I could do to it. Dual exhaust, a better clutch, electric start, maybe even some functioning pop-up headlights would be cool. So comment down below on what you want to see happen to the race car bed. If this video gets 10,000 likes, we'll make a follow-up video using some of those suggestions. Please be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss the next episode. I appreciate you watching.